I awoke to the sharp insistence of my alarm clock. It was an old-fashioned, wind-up model, complete with two small metal bells perched on top. I opened my eyes just long enough to locate the shut-off button, then brought two fingers down on it, silencing the clamor and sending the unwelcome noise into instant oblivion. The last thing I remembered before the alarm clock began to ring was a vivid dream. In it, Terry and Sylvia were resting together on a large bed, relaxed and completely unguarded. They moved languidly, absorbed in their own sensations, seemingly unaware of anything beyond the moment. I watched quietly for a time, caught between curiosity and awe, before joining them and offering my attention in turn. I was careful and deliberate, mindful to share my focus evenly, as though time itself mattered even within the boundaries of a dream. I had brought both of them to an overwhelming peak and was just beginning to wonder what might come next when that cursed alarm suddenly went off. Talk about terrible timing. Honestly, I made my way groggily toward the bathroom for my morning shower. The door was closed, and I could hear my sister humming softly as she finished drying off. Normally she would have been done and back in her room getting dressed by the time I reached the door, so the delay was an unexpected inconvenience. I was dealing with the familiar discomfort that can accompany waking up, and the pressure was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. I urgently needed to use the bathroom, and in my half-awake state, my lack of clothing barely registered as a concern. At that moment, relief was the only thing on my mind. "Hey, sis. Could you please hurry? I really need to use the bathroom," I called out through the closed door. "It's open, go ahead and come in." I didn't need to be told twice. I opened the door, stepped inside, and quietly closed it behind me as I headed toward the bathroom. When I entered, I saw my sister standing in front of the vanity, a towel wrapped securely around her. She was reaching for the hairdryer, apparently unaware of my arrival at first. Because of how tense and uncomfortable I felt, it was impossible to stand, so I sat down on the toilet and quietly took care of things. There is a simple relief in emptying your bladder after a full night's sleep. When it finally seemed to be over, I waited a moment, then carefully shook off any remaining drops before standing up again. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that my sister was occasionally glancing at me using the mirror in front of her, rather than turning her head outright. It was a subtle habit, though still easy enough to notice. I didn't give it much thought or concern. We had grown up together and shared plenty of ordinary moments as children, so there was nothing unusual about it. She had only closed the door so she could go through her morning routine quietly, making sure not to wake me as she prepared for the day. I stood up, flushed the toilet, and stepped into the shower, drawing the curtain closed behind me. I turned on the water and adjusted it carefully until it reached a comfortable temperature, then pulled the knob that sent the water flowing through the shower head. Turning my back to the stream, I let the warm water run down the back of my neck for a few moments before tilting my head back and thoroughly wetting my hair. After shampooing and washing up, I felt refreshed and ready to face the day ahead. My sister had already dried her hair and returned to her room to get dressed for school, leaving the door open so the heat and lingering moisture could escape. I dried myself thoroughly, from the top of my head down to my toes, using a large, fluffy towel before hanging it neatly on the shower rod to dry. The towel my sister had used was still draped over the doorknob, and I hung that one up as well before leaving the room. A quick pass with the comb and my hair was ready to go. I never used the hairdryer. I didn't like the way it made my hair feel. It was old, noisy, and a hassle to use. My sister, on the other hand, had long hair that reached nearly to her lower back and needed the extra time and effort. My hair was fairly short and didn't require hot air to dry. I finished up by spraying on some deodorant, completing my morning grooming routine. I headed back to my room and noticed my sister getting ready, dressed in her familiar plaid skirt and white blouse. It was the same style of outfit she had worn since she first started public school, updated over the years with newer, larger versions as she grew. The look had become something of a constant, changing only in size as she got older. She was still young and hadn't reached adolescence yet, so she dressed simply and practically. I'd seen her getting ready many times before, and there was nothing unusual about it, just the everyday routine of a child preparing for school, comfortable in familiar clothes and unaware of any reason to think otherwise. We had been raised by our mother to be comfortable and unashamed of our bodies, and at that stage of our lives neither of us felt any need for privacy from one another. Seeing each other while changing clothes or moving about the house was simply part of everyday life and never felt unusual. There was nothing to conceal, and it was refreshing not to feel rushed or self-conscious when we passed one another in the hallway or stepped into a bedroom. That easygoing atmosphere made our home feel relaxed and natural. I went to my room, dressed quickly, grabbed my school bag, and headed out to the kitchen. Mom was there, preparing lunch for my sister and me. My lunch was usually the same: a lettuce and cheese sandwich, a can of pop that was already warm, most often grape, my favorite flavor, and some kind of dessert she had baked a day or two earlier. Cornbread, or Johnny cake as we called it, was my dessert of choice, and she often made it simply because she knew how much I loved it. She was thoughtful like that. I grabbed a quick bowl of cereal for breakfast before heading out the door and making my way to the bus stop. "Have a good day, Nick," she called out just as I was closing the door behind me. "I will, Mom," I replied. I walked to the bus stop, wondering what the day might have in store for me. After everything that had happened yesterday, I truly had no idea how today would unfold. Still, I felt optimistic. I arrived at the bus stop smiling, deciding that I might as well put on a friendly face for the world to see. "Hey, Nick." I turned to see Bill McGill walking toward me as he arrived at the bus stop. "Hi, Bill. How are you doing?" I replied. Bill was a year older than me and in the 10th grade, but despite the age difference, we were about the same height and had a similar build. "I'm doing okay," he said. "How about you?" "I'm good, thanks," I answered, then added thoughtfully, "though I'm a little unsure about how school will go today." I scrunched up my face slightly and continued, "Yesterday was pretty confusing. I'm hoping today won't be nearly as rough." He smiled and said, "I remember feeling completely lost during my first few days of high school. It took me ages to memorize my class schedule, and I constantly had to check the copies taped inside my books and binders. Honestly, I still do that from time to time." Bill turned his head to look behind him and said, "Here comes Roy. He's a good guy, my best friend." I hadn't noticed Roy on the bus the day before, even though Bill insisted he had been there. Roy was a big guy, standing at least 6 inches taller than both Bill and me, with a solid, heavy build. He smiled when he spotted us and greeted us with, "Hey guys, how's it going?" "Good. You?" Bill and I replied at the same time. Roy was 2 years older than me and 1 year older than Bill. "I'm doing great," he said cheerfully. "Second day of grade 11, and only 2 more years until I'm done with school." As we were talking, a small, delicate-looking girl stepped out from behind Roy. In contrast to him, she was very petite, shorter than both Bill and me, with a slim build. She wore a neat white blouse paired with a modest black skirt, white stockings, and small black shoes, each finished with a shiny buckle. Everything about her appearance was tidy and understated, and she had an innocent, cheerful look about her, cute as the saying goes, like a button. "Nick, this is my little sister, Anna. She wasn't feeling well yesterday, so today is her first day of high school. I'm counting on you and Bill to keep an eye on her and make sure no one bothers her. Back in public school, some of the other girls used to pick on her for being so small, and a few of the guys weren't very kind either. I want you two to make sure she doesn't get a hard time here. If anyone does give her trouble, let me know right away and I'll handle it." As he spoke, his eyes briefly took on a hardened look, and it was easy to see just how much he cared about his little sister. Bill and I answered in unison once again, "Don't worry, Roy. We'll look out for her." We smiled, then laughed briefly at each other before turning back to Roy and putting on our most serious expressions. He smiled reassuringly at Anna and said, "See? It won't be so bad. Bill and Nick will make sure I hear about it if anyone gives you a hard time." He then gave Bill and me a meaningful look. His body language said it all. Anyone who bothered his sister would quickly find themselves dealing with serious consequences. She looked at Bill and me and said softly, "Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it." "No problem, Anna," Bill and I replied together once again. I decided then that I liked Bill. He clearly felt the same way I did about Roy and Anna, and that sense of shared loyalty felt good. I was confident that before long, Bill, Roy, and I would become good friends. The bus arrived just then, and we boarded as it came to a stop and the doors opened. Once everyone was inside, the doors closed smoothly, and the bus pulled away, continuing on its route. I kept my head slightly lowered as I walked toward the back of the bus. Terry was seated directly behind her mother, quietly reading a magazine as I passed. Remembering what she had told me the day before, I avoided looking in her direction and continued on to the back row of seats. Roy, Bill, and I sat together at the back of the bus, talking as it began its slow, winding journey through the countryside on the way to school. I was certain I would have been bored out of my mind if the three of us hadn't been chatting and passing the time together.